Marketer of the Day, number 501. Earn more money from fewer clients. Big goals, mindset shifts, and marketing experiments with Joe Sanok. Hey everyone, we're so glad that you're listening right now to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We're talking with Joe Sanok. He's a counselor, a consultant, a speaker, and he has the number one podcast for counselors called the Practice of the Practice podcast. And he has a bunch of interviews with all kinds of amazing guests. He's a writer for PsychCentral. He's been on Huffington Post, Forbes, Good Magazine, and he's a keynote speaker and author of 5 books and is a top consultant. So Joe, glad to be talking to you.
Robert, thanks so much for having me.
Glad to have you. So, I mean, with all these crazy things going on, what's on your mind lately? What has you fired up?
Yeah, one thing I do is every year I look at what's my big goal for the year that's going to make everything else easier. The book, The One Thing, has really helped me structure that out. So every year I have a big goal that's going to move the needle forward in a massive way. And each year that I do that, I've been able to usually achieve that goal, but then also take a massive step towards my bigger goals.
Well, great. So you're ahead of most people who kind of make the goals and the goals fall apart or make them too big or small. So do you mind sharing what's your big goal this year?
Yeah, for this year, we've launched a supportive member community for people that are in the healthcare professions that are just starting a practice. And rather than just have it be e-courses or, just like a supportive Facebook group, we've really looked at what do our ideal clients want. And we interviewed a bunch of them, and they wanted a supportive community of people. They wanted a small group connection, but they also wanted that training and feedback. And so we've really looked at how do we create something that from the second somebody says, I want to start a private practice, all the way through scaling it and making it into $1 million practice, what do they need along the way? So we're starting at the very beginning with people starting, and then as we build content, then we can add people in throughout. And for me, that's a big step forward, because to go from a couple years ago where it was getting more one-on-one consulting clients at a higher rate, and then last year launching a bunch of mastermind groups and conferences, now I can really start to scale where if I get thousands of people in this, that's going to give us the infrastructure and the finances to really grow and disrupt the industry in a positive way.
Well, super cool. I mean, there's so much good stuff in there, not only from talking to people and asking them what they want. I mean, what a concept, right? But also kind of, it sounds like this strategy of like building things up to the point where you can't build it anymore, and then maybe like forcing yourself to reinvent things, it sounds like.
Yeah, for me, I try to get each goal to a point where it's as automated as possible. There's always going to be things that I have to touch within it. For example, if I have a mastermind group, obviously I have to show up for that. But if I can automate all of the onboarding, if I can automate all of the resources, if I can have an assistant doing a lot of that, then the mental and creative space in my brain is freed up to work on the new project. A lot of entrepreneurs will have all these ideas and go after whatever their big idea is right now, but they add more to their plate without taking things off that plate. And so I found that if you can keep offloading things from your plate, then you have more creativity, more ability to come up with new ideas, and then you're an innovator in the field rather than just someone that's trying to do something that everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I mean, first of all, like I'm super jealous of your lifestyle here of just being able to kind of, do what you want and focus on the thinking. And it seems like people like you who basically have it all figured out, it's like you're able to move fast enough to actually do something, because it seems like when they don't offload things and they keep taking on more and more, I mean, I'm better now, but I can still relate to maybe taking on too much. It seems like all the action taking is taken up by switching gears, and then it's tough to make any progress. And by the time you do make progress, a couple of years have passed, and then everything's changed around us, and then it's like we're always kind of playing catch up, it seems like.
Yeah, and I would agree to an extent. The me having it all figured out side, I would say definitely not. And that's hopefully refreshing for your audience. The big mindset shift that I've seen people take where they go from being just a solopreneur or maybe having a couple virtual staff to really having a CEO mindset is that those that are most successful are those that see everything as an experiment. And so for this member community that we just launched, we started it as an experiment. I interviewed about 20 of our ideal clients, said, what would you want? Sketched out a landing page, didn't put much into the infrastructure. And then we had a pre-launch invitation. And then on the day of the launch, then we opened up the doors and we had 200 people on the wait list and we only had 50 spots. And we sold out in about an hour, and with 35 of those spots going in the first 7 minutes. But we viewed it as an experiment that was going to give us knowledge either way. So if it was a fall on your face failure and nobody signed up for it, nobody gave money, nobody was interested, we learned from that. And if we did it successfully, we learned from that as well. And so the most effective marketers are those that are constantly looking at, well, what do I learn from this? This is an experiment. I'm doing my best stab at doing something amazing, but also realizing that there's not really pass fail. It's just information no matter where you're at.
I love it. So that way there's less hesitation in saying, well, there's a lot of writing on this, or what if this messes up? At least this way, if it messes up, then you're more open to tweaking it or trying again or something else like that.
Yeah, like this launch we just did, there were so many mess ups. For example, we got to 42 of the 50 that sold, and then all of a sudden the sales just dropped off. And I was in the system like, what happened? I'm sending emails to people like, there's still spots. But really in PayPal, instead of having the top amount be 50, it was somehow at 42. And so we screwed that up. And then we didn't realize that people's PayPal email might not be the same email they signed up for our email course. So then they weren't added to the appropriate list and all the automations were off. So that's super frustrating when it's happening, but it's also good knowledge, and I'm letting people know we're doing our best with this. We're trying to help you join this group, but we're also going to screw up too. So it shows people you don't have to be paralyzed by perfection, because you really just need to get things done and get information on those activities.
I love it. And what you're making me think of here is, in the past, when I partner with people or when I hired people to do things, it seemed like, like the launches would never really go as planned. There would always be some kind of a hiccup, like you mentioned, like the automation wouldn't work, or I'd have to scramble and make some accounts by hand because when we tested it worked, but then under load it didn't work or whatever happened. And it seemed like in the past, I'd work with people who would just give up at the first little tiny pebble in the road. Like one thing wouldn't work and they'd just be given up, unreachable, off to the next thing. And it seemed like it took a few iterations to get to the point where I would team up with someone where if the launch either it didn't go as planned or there was some technical problem, then that would give them the motivation to rise to the challenge and fix it, as opposed to it didn't go my way, I'm just giving up.
Right. And I think that's where my psychologist background comes in our negative self-talk. If we already think, man, I'm a poser, I shouldn't be in this industry, who am I? Everybody else has their act together but me. Then when we screw up, then that negative self-talk is reinforced. And we say, see, this is proof that I should not be in this industry. I should just give up. Whereas once you get a little bit of traction, when you really are listening to your audience and they recognize that you're human, you're doing your best, you're trying to do a good launch, but you're going to screw some things up, then people have so much more grace with that. So, for example, our webinar platform, we were having so many issues with it. So I went back and I took all the slides. I just used QuickTime on my computer to record the whole webinar so that it was just in our private Facebook group. It wasn't perfect. People then didn't have as much of the Q&A interaction. My daughter walked in the middle of this and she was like, I need a Band-Aid. And I'm like, honey, please leave. Like I told you, please leave. And people loved it. They said, you are demonstrating that you need to just get things done sometimes, give as much of the content as you can, and you don't have to be perfect. And I actually found that people liked hearing my daughter in the background asking for a Band-Aid rather than me go through and edit it out. It made me a real person that they could actually connect with and say, you know what, Joe's doing his best. He sometimes screws up, but I want to follow him more because he somehow balances all of this lifestyle mixed with his business together.
Super funny. And I can totally relate to that because like I come from a computer programming background, and I used to make all these products that would show on video how to program stuff, how to code stuff. And as you know, with computers, I mean, we just, the last 8 minutes of our conversation is all about computers messing up. So I'd show people how to make an app or something, and then it would mess up. And at first I'd think, oh no, I'm such a bad teacher. But then I would go and fix it really quick. And then I would forget to edit it out. But then I found out years later, I just happened to run into someone at a conference and we were talking. And he was like, I'm so glad that you didn't edit that out because it showed me your mindset. It showed me how you fixed the problem. And then there was that aspect that you mentioned there of like the transparency, that it's okay if he messed up, it's okay for me to mess up as well. And so something that really, and also, you know what else is cool about that is if I had the choice of seeing something that was a little rough around the edges but had good information versus something that was super polished but had bad information, I mean, I'm going to take the rough with good information. So I mean, I think we're on the same page there. I like that mindset. But something that you mentioned that I want to make sure that we get to is, so you mentioned that you yourself are a psychologist. So how the heck did you go from point A to point B there? How did you go from being a psychologist to this whole business that you built here?
Yeah, so I had a full-time job at a community college. Before that, I was a foster care supervisor making $40,000 a year. And I started a private practice on the side just as a way to pay off student loan debt. So, sessions were $100 to $150, and over time we were able to pay off student loan debt before we thought we would. But I picked up some really just easy things that the general kind of marketing and business world finds as kind of like no-duh things that most of us in the counseling world had never heard of, like return on investment or SEO, optimizing a website, things that everybody seems to know in the business world, but we were never taught in counseling school. And so I just started a blog, practiceofthepractice.com, talking about the books I was reading, what I was testing, what I was trying, totally as this side gig. It might take off, it might not. I might make $12 off Amazon affiliate links or off an occasional Bluehost sign up, but it really was just this way to express what I was learning as a co-learner. And then in 2013, I was listening to a ton of podcasts, people like Pat Flynn, Lee Dumas, a lot of these people in the passive income space. And I thought, well, I'm going to launch a podcast to go deeper and explore some of these issues, maybe with it being a viable business model, but we'll see. And so then it was in 2014 that I had really realized that the income I had made in the previous year matched my full-time income, working about 10 hours a week and podcasting while my daughter was taking her nap. And at the time my wife was pregnant. And so really just kind of tested it out. And then at each step said, well, what's the reasonable next step? So I started consulting with people one-on-one, really learned the value of my time. So started raising my prices. Tried some things that didn't work, tried some things that did work, like hosting conferences that were face-to-face. And then each year just continued to grow off of that. And then this past year, we hit $500,000 for the first time when, just a handful of years ago, I was making $40,000 a year at a full-time job at a community college.
Super cool. So it remains true to your philosophy of trying different experiments, of not just you didn't just say, oh, I'm going to put in my notice today, I'm going to drop everything, I'm going to make all this stuff, it better work. You tried out different experiments, and it sounds like one thing led to the next thing, led to the next thing, and then when you came across the doors closing in your face, so to speak, with, for example, the conferences, you didn't just say, oh, well, this is a reason to give up. You just found another avenue.
Yeah, and I think that really optimizing my time. So right now I work 3 days a week and have 4-day weekends every week. And so I set very clear boundaries around my time, which has forced me to really have to get as much done in a short period of time, but then say, well, what's left undone that I could give to somebody else? And so then bringing on assistants that are at a lower hourly rate and bringing on different marketers, different people that can help grow the business outside of my own time. And when I made that switch, that really allowed me to continue to scale even while I was stand-up paddleboarding with my family on the weekend.
Well, super cool. So all of our time is valuable. We only have a limited amount of it. But then something I'm curious about is how you make that choice of what is deserving of your time and what can be outsourced. And it's easy to say, oh, I'm just going to do the things that make it unique to me. But I mean, for example, like you're slumming it here on the podcast with me, right? So, I mean, not to self-deprecate myself too much, but like, there's other places that you could be. And I think that for myself, like I do all these things in my business and I'm like, oh, that whole thing of, guesting on other people's podcasts. I kind of go on 1 or 2 shows a month, but I really want to ramp it up. So how do you decide with your time being so limited, what's worth your while, what's not?
Yeah. So in regards to podcast discussions, even if there's a podcast that gets 50 or 100 listens per episode per month, and so it's a super small podcast, if somebody said to you, can we record a video of you over the next 20 minutes and we're going to have 100 people that are going to show up every month and they're going to watch this video of you and they might become people that want to work with you. You would say, absolutely. It's 20 minutes of my time and, over a year, I'm going to potentially reach thousands of people. And then over time that might even grow. For me, especially podcast interviews are a great way to spend your time. There's very few podcast interviews that I turn down because you never know who's going to be that next person that's hustling so hard that they really take off. And then you're one of their first interviews or you're somewhere in the middle. And so it's just, to me, that's a great use of your time because it's tapping into other people's audience that may never have heard of me. Now, outside of podcast interviews, I start with what's the thing that needs to keep getting automated and that I need to keep working on that I've committed to. So for me, that would be ongoing one-on-one consulting with people. That would be the mastermind groups. And then I have a conference in the summer called Slow Down School, where we slow down for a couple days, go hiking, we drink on the beach, and then we work on people's businesses for a couple days. So those are the things that I've already committed to. People have either paid for them, they're something that takes up my time. So that's first. Then I look at what's my big goal for the year. So for me, it's building this supportive online community that's teaching and supporting people. And so then I need to put time into that Facebook group, into developing that side of things. And then after that, kind of all the rest comes in. And so then, for example, about a year and a half ago, I realized I was really falling behind on email. So I have all of these email sequences that are happening. And in some of them, people reply and say, hey, I have a quick question. I don't personally need to reply to that 200 or 300 emails a day. So I pay somebody to go in there. She has scripts for almost everything. If she doesn't know how to answer something or feels like it takes my attention, she just stars it. And if it's hyper important, she'll text me and say, hey, your TEDx pitch just got accepted. So, congratulations, or something like that, that she knows that I really want to know about. And so then I go in and I do 15 emails instead of 300. And so she's then able to reply from my email as herself. So she says, this is Emily, Joe's director of details. Excuse me. And she's herself, but she's saying, in order to help things move along, let me just give you these links that you asked for. So those are the little things that, they take a couple minutes a day or an hour a day. But by having that hour back, it has freed up so much time that I can do things like this that are a better use of my time.
Super great. And it sounds like by sort of having this this virtual assistant, like in the email example, you have the virtual assistant kind of go through and get 95% of it taken out and then pass the rest up the ladder to you. It sounds like that, number one, that you don't have to completely remove yourself from the business. You can still be in there for the really important stuff. And then number two, that it doesn't have to be on or off. With this kind of scenario, you can just have someone jump in a little bit as needed and build them up where they're handling more and more of your emails as your assistant here develops more and more of the responses. But it's not like it has to be just suddenly rushing into things. You can gradually bring these people in here.
Absolutely. Rory Vaden, he has this wonderful kind of funnel of decision making that's all about procrastinating on purpose. And so he walks through, could this task be automated through technology? Could this task be automated by someone else? And then when it finally gets to you, to say, is this a pressing task that I need to do for moving forward in my business or, an emergency? And then if not, then we intentionally procrastinate that task and move it back to the bottom till we can find either a need to do it for ourselves, a virtual assistant or assistant to do it, or a technology to do it. And by doing that, that then has helped me be able to decide where to best spend my time.
And that's really great. And that's reassuring for me because I do something similar. Like there will be things that are somewhat pressing items, but really not important. And I'll push it back a few days and I'll do the more important things. And then there'll be like these little things that I keep pushing back. But I don't feel, I've been telling myself up until now that I don't feel as bad about it as maybe I should because they're just not very important. And I'm still aware of them, but they're little things like going and, checking footer links on a web page. And it's one of those things where I just could go and jump in and do it in, 10, 20 minutes, but there are more important things. So maybe I shouldn't feel as bad about pushing those low priority things to later.
I agree. I actually keep a today list and I keep a someday list in my phone, just in the notes section. So if I have ideas or I have things that I want to get to, I put that on the someday list, and then I put one or two things on my today list that are the big things that I really need to get done. And if I get those things done, I'm happy. If I get to other things, that's great. For me, this really kind of naturally came out of 2012. It was a really rough year for our family. My daughter, right before her first birthday, had open heart surgery. And then a couple weeks after that, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. My wife had a miscarriage. It was just one of those years that when people have it, you're like, what more can hit our family? But that was the year that I launched Practice of the Practice, and I was kicking off the podcast in the midst of cancer treatment. And for me, what I had to ask myself every time I made a podcast or was working on a blog was, why am I spending time doing this rather than hanging out with my daughter who's about to have open heart surgery, or hanging out with my family before I'm about to go in for cancer treatment? And so it made those top things that are going to move the needle forward, that will help people but also help my bottom line, come top of mind. And so what I hope no one has to deal with that, but they can just learn from it, that if we just say, what is my biggest priority that moves the needle forward for my business, but also impacts the world in a positive way, that formula is going to help you grow and scale in a way that just kind of going after money or going after your email list or whatever the specific kind of thing is that's front of mind. If you have that guiding question, that's going to really help you make better decisions as a business owner, but then also as someone that's bettering the world.
And along those lines, something that I've noticed that has helped me is being more of a people person and breaking out of my shell. And I mean, as a psychologist, I assume that you're pretty good with people, but there are these things that are the high value activities that we're talking about here, right? Like going on the other podcasts, being on your own podcast, making the YouTube videos, the live action stuff, talking to people one-on-one, doing the conferences, all involve talking to, reaching out and talking to people. And I'm definitely better at the people skills than I was, years ago. But still, sometimes I'll be making that discovery call, and sometimes the phone will be ringing, and I'm like, oh, I hope they don't pick up. I'll be like, I feel bad, but I hope they don't pick up. That way I can just chill out for half an hour or an hour. I don't have to always be on. And I know that a lot of people who are listening to this show are somewhat computer geeks or marketing nerds, and just a lot of them are afraid to break out of their shell, or they don't have the confidence. So what would you say to people like that, who they might be seeing what you've accomplished with all these great things that you've done, which involve dealing with people, but how the heck, what's your secret to breaking out of your shell? And what would you tell the people who have trouble with that?
Well, I think for people that have trouble with that, I would start with that that's super normal. There's a lot of people that are not energized by other people. They're called introverts. That means that their energy comes from not being around people, having that alone time, reading a book, playing a video game, somehow getting away from those social interactions. So I would start with, more than half the population doesn't get energy from other people. And so that's super normal. But then we'd want to look at, well, if your business or if your marketing requires that, look at when you are best during the day. When do you have the best energy for those social engagements? So if it's after doing 4 one-on-one calls, that's probably not the best time for you to have another one-on-one call. It may be that you have those really important social engagements earlier in the day, or maybe your energy peaks right after lunch. Figuring that out. And then I think also looking at, well, what are your biggest fears about what's going to go wrong? And then challenging those and asking, are those actually true? So a common fear is, I'm not going to know what to ask these people. Well, you know how to have conversations with your friends. You just ask them about their day, ask them about what they've been up to. There's people that you probably have natural conversations with that you don't get worried about. And if you don't, then maybe if everybody you're having anxiety over, that might be a bigger issue that, speaking to a coach or a therapist might be helpful. But say that it's itemized, thinking about, well, how can I think about these new relationships in the same way as I do with my friends? So it might be, I'm going to just ask a bunch of follow-up questions. I'm going to be curious. So what's your business like? Tell me where you're struggling. What do you wish you could have happen later on this year if we work together? And then when you hear all of that, then you can frame what you want to talk about around what they've just discussed. And so I found that the more curious you are, the more that you engage in getting the other person talking, oftentimes that makes it a lot easier to worry about how you're going to come across to somebody else.
That's a really good strategy. I like your way of thinking. And I don't know much about psychology, but I can hear a little bit of the therapist in you, as far as saying like, well, there's this big, scary cloud of fear that's in front of you. And instead of just saying, I can't pass that, you're breaking it down, you're unpacking stuff, you're looking at scenarios and like commonalities and other situations where that little sub problem that you're now afraid of, instead of attacking the big problem, that little sub problem, you compare it to something else that's that you're not afraid of, or even just reframing things in a new way where you have this conversation and it's not like you're the one talking, you're being curious, you're asking questions. It's on the other person to answer these questions. So I really like your thought process as far as kind of attacking that problem and unpacking that. And also of like your mindset in general of experimenting, right? Even that concept of knowing when you're best during the day is you try some stuff out and then you go back and look at the data. You look at how your energy level was or how you felt or how well you know yourself, and then you go from there. So I mean, this is a really great just a really great way of thinking that I'm hearing from you as far as just that experimental mindset that it's really almost impossible to fail. The only way to fail is to stop trying.
Well, and yeah, and when you get paralyzed by perfection, nobody wants to see someone that's perfect anyway. And so for you to have unfinished work because it's not perfect versus work that's completed and it's not perfect, but at least you're taking a stab at it. You are slowing yourself down from learning by not putting things out there. So if it's, I'm going to write some blog posts about this specific technology, or I'm going to do blog posts about this app, if you're just going over it over and over, is it perfect? Is the grammar right? Just get it out there. Like, just ship it, So the more that you can do that, then you can really start to get some traction. The other thing that you had asked about that I wanted to circle back to in regards to kind of leveling up and use of time, one thing that I didn't mention was the service. It's totally free for people that are contributing. It's called Help a Reporter Out. So Help a Reporter Out every day. There are people in the news, there are writers that are looking for experts to weigh in on a variety of topics. And so that's how I got into Forbes, Huffington Post, a variety of other things by weighing in as an expert and then getting quoted in these major news publications. And that's how a ton of major news publications get their content when they quote somebody. They could say Robert Plant from the Marketer of the Day podcast says this, and then you can say as seen on Forbes, Money, Entrepreneur, all these things. And really you develop those connections with people over time that are writers, and they'll level up and take you with them.
That's a great lesson, and it's a great reminder because I had someone on this podcast maybe a couple of years ago talking about Help a Reporter Out and about guest blogging and about getting into the roundups and things like that, and that's totally a great reminder. I need to jump back in and do that. And so as far as your time strategy for doing that sort of thing, I mean, I know that we touched a little bit about, with the podcast guesting and things like that, like you're looking for like the rising stars, you can find the ways to do these things, but do you set aside like specific time during the day or the week to do this kind of writing stuff?
At this point, I haven't done as much of the writing and content creation to attract people in because the sales funnel we've developed is so solid. And so really it's getting people into that sales funnel. So if they're starting a practice, we'll recommend they go to practicewithapractice.com/start. And then we have our free 28-step checklist on starting a practice, whereas we have other things for people that are growing a practice. The things I do every single month are my monthly income report blog. I do the podcasts, at least usually 6 or 7 times a month. And then a lot of the webinars at this point I have transcribed into either an ebook or blog posts that then we clean up and we reuse. And so something like doing a Facebook Live, downloading that, having my assistant upload it to YouTube, pulling the closed captions off of that, and then creating a blog post off of that. That only takes me the 5 minutes of the Facebook Live versus some kind of longer form articles that I'm writing.
Well, fantastic. Well, I know that we're pressed for time here, so I'll let you go, but everyone should go to practiceofthepractice.com/start to see what you have going on, to see some of these things in action, and to see just the whole system in place as far as what you and your team has going on. As far as you put some stuff out there, they get the rest handled for you. So practiceofthepractice.com/start. And any other links to drop here as we wrap up?
No, that would be the best one for people that are in the healthcare field starting a practice. Thanks so much, Robert, for having me.
If you're a future podcaster, new podcaster, existing podcaster, or you're looking to make more money with your podcast with less time, you owe it to yourself to check out doneforyoupodcasting.com. We handle any or all of your podcasting needs. Go to doneforyoupodcasting.com right now.